All right, good evening. Welcome to PS. This is The Last of Us, a show where we discuss the HBO series The Last of Us. Each week, we'll be giving our opinions, criticisms, and having discussions of each episode in the series. We'll also be discussing the PlayStation award winning game of the same title and weighing them against one another. So, this show is going to be available each Monday night on our YouTube channel. And we'll be spoiling the game also in these conversations. And we're going to be having conversations with the understanding that you, the viewer, have watched the episode we're talking about and have probably also played the game. For those just stopping by, my name is Fred Oakman, and this is Jake Peters. We also host a weekly PlayStation podcast titled PS This Is Awesome, a PlayStation podcast. And we've been going strong for many years, so if you're interested in weekly PlayStation discussions or interested in viewing more content like this, just subscribe to this channel. We'll do the rest of that heavy lifting. And lastly, we do have a Patreon for our PlayStation podcast, so if you want, you can support us for $1 a month. We'll give you a shout out on that show and mail you a free die cut vinyl sticker. And you can find that at patreon.com/PS. This is awesome. Your dollar each month goes a very long ways in helping us sustain the cost of doing this show. And today we're obviously having a conversation about Season 1, Episode 5 of The Last of Us, which was titled Endure and Survive. Now, I was a little confused initially, Jake, and we're going to keep this episode somewhat truncated, but when I was looking up for the title of the show, I came across the title that said The Darkness on the Edge of Town. Was that last episode? Or did they change the title of this?
I don't think so. I don't know where you saw that.
I definitely saw that.
I don't recall ever seeing that.
So I think what was last week's episode titled? I don't know what it was called. Episode 4. I guess it doesn't matter. But I had The Darkness at the Edge of Town queued up for this graphic. And
the last one was called Please Hold My Hand.
yeah, so there was literally something somewhere that said The Darkness on the Edge of Town. And I mean,
maybe that was like some international name.
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. So I went in and hurried up and fixed it. Endure and Survive. Endure and Survive is obviously the tagline from the comic books that Ellie collects, and she has a moment where she shares this with Sam in this episode. And that was the Savage Starlight comic book. But Jake, let's get into this episode a little bit. The big change, the big fly on the wall, the big thing that is different is that Sam is deaf in the show, and he is not in the game. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I think that it's awesome that they made Sam deaf. Not only because you don't see that a lot, but also because one, it made the character that much more interesting.
Yeah.
And two, the way that they did it was so well done. I know this is something that not a lot of people think about, but my wife is a speech pathologist, and she was talking about how much she loved the episode because not only was the actor that played Sam actually deaf,
Right.
They were talking about how, you know, everyone in the cast was like learning ASL to want to try to talk to him and everything, and how cool that was just behind the scenes. But the way that they portrayed Ellie's interactions with him, sort of normalizing his communication with her and not making it like he's weird for being deaf.
Right.
And this is something that community and the speech community and the deaf community just have, you know, they struggle for, is the ability to have their way of life normalized. They're still communicating. It's like they're speaking a different language. So the fact that Ellie was able to interact with Sam in such a way that normalized the way that he was, the way that he spoke, I think is really impressive, even though it's a very subtle touch that maybe not many people would think about. They might just be like, oh, this kid's deaf and oh, Ellie's talking to him. But you don't realize that, like, every day, kids are deaf, and people that are Ellie's age, like trying to communicate with them it's much more challenging, and a lot of times it ends up being like, you know, it ends up getting weird, and like the way that they portrayed it, I think was just so good.
Yeah, and an interesting thing, Druckmann, the director of the game, or the, I don't know, creative director of the game, I guess, or whatever he did in The Last of Us, he indicated at the end of this episode that he was actually disappointed that he didn't have this idea for the game, because he was like, man, yeah, that's awesome. That would have been awesome to do in the game. The other thing that I thought was another reason why I think it plays into being a really cool change is because we live in a world where the clickers rely on noise, right? So you have this juxtaposition. The clickers are sensitive to sounds, and as long as you're quiet, you're good. So then you have Sam, who can't hear anything, but because he can sign and Henry can sign, that allows them to communicate with precision in the presence of clickers, right? Which is really an interesting idea to be able to, like, what greater thing to know how to do in the presence of an enemy that isn't a threat if they can't hear you, is to be able to sign to one another. So I thought that was really interesting. So I don't know, something I thought of as well. So let's talk about the show. It starts off, now we're getting a glimpse into the faction, Kathleen's faction, and all this backstory that we didn't get in the game. Kathleen wasn't even in the game. And starts off with the overthrow of Fedra, and people are just chanting like, fuck you, Fedra, and they're just literally hanging humans and like butchering them and just murdering them in the street, dragging their corpses through the streets. It's really awful to watch. I mean, it really seems like some of the shit that you would see like Mexican drug cartels do, right? Hanging people from like light posts and stuff. Like, it just seems like very violent, very brutal. And you do see Henry and Sam hiding out, and that's when you learn that Henry and they're signing to one another, and you're wondering, like, are they doing this because they know how to do it? Or are they doing this because it's a necessity? And you don't quite know yet, right? What'd you take of this Fedra overthrow we got a glimpse into?
I guess it's something that you would expect is going to happen in some places in this world.
Right.
And it's not something that we really get much sort of background on when you play the game. We don't have that much exposition. But I think that one of the things that they kind of subtly discuss via this whole sequence, and even some of the dialogue and stuff afterwards, is that the Fedra in Kansas City were really fucked up,
really corrupt, and
like
they
people,
just raped
like
people,
like
and murdered people.
Yeah, like people, like the Fedra in Boston, where Joel and Ellie were from or started their journey. They were shitty, but they were sort of just like kind of militant protectors. Whereas it seems like the Fedra in this particular zone, they were abusing the people in quite a serious way, and eventually the people just had enough, and they overthrew Fedra and just literally murdered all of them.
Yeah, it sounded like they had a dictatorship.
And
they're exploiting their power, right? Imposing their power over people. Yeah.
And it seemed to have this rubber band effect that everybody, history seems to always forget about, is that people are treated a certain way, then they get what's coming to them, and then the people that rebel end up being the same or worse than the people that they were overthrowing.
It's a vicious cycle. That's so true. That happens all the time in real world. Happens all the time.
Like if you look at like how Kathleen handled the quote unquote what'd you call them, collaborators. They had them all locked up in a cell, a Fedra cell. and she comes in and she's all like, we're not Fedra, blah 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 blah. We'll give you a trial. You'll all be guilty, but at least you'll serve a little jail time and you'll be fine. Yada yada yada. And then in true, this is hyperbolic, but like, Hitler-esque fashion, as soon as she walks out the room, she turns around to the guy, Perry, her number 2, and just says, "Kill them all."
Yeah, they're worthless.
Like, as soon as she finds out, like, she just she's been so corrupted by this hatred for Fedra that she's become Fedra herself.
Right.
And I think that that's something that is telling, because as a society, especially in America, it's something that people really, I think, need to think about. And we're not going to get into American politics in this episode. I just mean,
oh, come on.
No, I'm just kidding. I just mean like how bad it's gotten with the internet fighting and the back and forth and the right and the left and the progressive and conservative and all this stuff. It's gotten so volatile that a lot of the people on the inside don't realize that they have, in their opposition, they've opposed their combatants so fiercely that they've basically just become them. It's like you both walk the other direction away from each other around the world. Eventually, you're going to meet each other on the other side.
Right.
And I think that they did a really great job of showing this thought experiment. I don't know, thought experiment's not the right thing, but like historical phenomena, psychological phenomena that happens with humanity, especially in mob mentality.
It's definitely some sort of commentary, right? In an entertainment way. And the other thing that's interesting is this ultimately will be a through line in the story of The Last of Us. It's just the human condition.
It's not uncommon. Yeah, it's not uncommon for post-apocalyptic kind of things like this. I think The Road kind of handled it similarly too, but there's a difference. What I'm saying is that like The Last of Us is a little bit different, but there's always the element of like people expect that, oh, when your needs are great enough, you turn into an animal. It doesn't really matter. But in this particular instance and some other instances in The Last of Us, they really do comment on the fact that like these two factions, whether you want to call them Hunters and Fireflies or Fedra and Fireflies or Hunters and Fedra, they're all different sides of the same coin whenever you just compare their methods. In terms of, they all have different reasons for their methods, but they all basically conform to the same brutality in this world. And one of the things I always loved about Neil Druckmann and his creation of this world is how he is able to shed commentary on all of this stuff without being fuck you about it.
Yeah,
like
it's really awesome.
So much stuff that we see in media and everything, when someone has a commentary about like, I'm just throwing an example out there. Let's just say, gay and lesbian rights or something like that. It's usually always under the guise of like, fuck you to the other guys, the people that don't believe that. Whereas like, it seems like The Last of Us is very much like, this is just the world, and these types of things happen when this type of stuff is in the world, and I'm just shining a spotlight on it. Not necessarily being like, oh, you suck if you believe this, you suck if you believe that. And I think that this is just another example of that, and I really appreciate it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's nice. In what he's really good at doing on top, to tack on, is he creates maybe we surely, I mean, obviously we have bias, we have opinions, we have this, that, and the other, but he creates, like you said, he lays it out as, this is what fucking time it is. This is why they're doing this. This is why they're doing this. This is why they're doing this. And this is why everything is fucked. And it's like, well, you take a step back and you're like, well, shit, You know, I mean, this isn't too far of a bridge from a lot of shit that goes on in the real world right now. And it's like we all have our motives, we all have our own prerogatives and our intentions. And you know, you're right, man. If you get ultimately, if you get to a point where you start getting engulfed by those things, you become, what's the saying from Batman? You live long enough to what? Live long enough to be the hero, or live long enough to be the villain. You either die a hero or live long enough to be the villain. That's what it is. And it's like one of those situations in a way. It's like, you know, once you get wrapped up in this shit, it's ultimately going to end up turning you into the bad person. Somehow, if you don't know your limits and you don't know when to say when, you know, if you put the brakes on before you go fucking crazy, then maybe you'll be all right. But yeah, what a cool way to show this world and a glimpse into the Fedras overtaking in Kansas City. You know, in the game it was Pittsburgh, but needless to say, you know, we learned from last episode Kathleen was trying to figure out, you know, where Henry and Sam were, and then the one guy who's kind of like a rat says, you know, Edelstein was with them or helping them, and then she's like, oh, okay. So you find out in this episode that Edelstein was I want to say wasn't a doctor. He was also with, I don't know exactly the situation. He's with Henry and Sam. He's trying to help them. He's giving them food. He's getting stuff from the base, and he knows of their location. And he's just this nice old man. He gives crayons to Sam, and eventually he's like, well, I'll be back. Well, time comes and goes, and they get up the next day, and Edelstein has not come back, right? So Sam kind of signs off to Henry and says, you know, is he dead? And then Henry's like, well, probably yes. And it's just very matter of fact. It's like, fuck, he's not wrong, because they did kill him.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's where we get into a situation where when Edelstein was over there, he tells Henry that Sam is scared because Henry looks scared, or that he said, you can't be scared in front of Sam. You know, he's seeing this, and then he's, you know, that's making him more scared. So then he paints like the mask on him and stuff with the crayons or the markers, and, you know, I think takes like the superhero approach or whatever. So I thought that was kind of cool with the mask. Any opinion on that part, Jake? Anything about that?
Yeah, I think it was just a touching moment of brotherly connection where he essentially used a bit of whimsy to give his brother some strength.
Yeah.
To kind of get through it, and I think that it's really just a point that kind of, it only took a second for them to do this, and it was enough to really, it did so much in that, I don't know, 10 seconds to kind of portray how much Henry really cares about his brother, that it's just, I don't know, it was just a great scene. That's all.
Yeah, I thought so too. And then we find out that Henry and Sam actually witnessed Joel and Ellie's arrival in Kansas City. So they're just like trying to get the fuck out of there because Edelstein's not coming back. And then you hear like this crazy loud noise of a vehicle, and then you hear like a crash, and then it shows Henry kind of like watching, and you can see Joel just fucking laying to waste those guys. And it's like, oh shit. So they already knew about Joel and Ellie before they came up on them in the end of episode 4. So it's nice you get, they play with the timeline a little bit, and I like that about this show so far, is like you get glimpses into, you know, they don't just start back right where they left off. They dial it back a little bit and paint a little more of that picture to show you how these characters kind of do their thing. But so Henry and Sam are trying to leave. You know, they run into Joel and Ellie in that 40-some story building. And Ellie, so now we see more of that altercation. And Ellie's just like, Joel wakes up, the guns are in their face, and Ellie is trying to convince Sam and Henry that Joel doesn't speak in a manner that will elicit trust. And she says in quotes, "That's just the way he sounds. He has an asshole voice." And she's like trying to get Joel to be nice, like let these guys. And Joel's just fucking talking to these guys like he wants to kill them. Like, yeah, all right, like just kind of staring at him, like, you know, real like they don't quite trust Joel. I think they're okay with the way Ellie's handling the situation, like really chill and just using like a regular, like, okay, we can be cool. But Joel's not like, whoa, we're friends. You know, he's not saying that he's friendly. He's just kind of watching and taking in the whole situation before he makes any decisions. And I'm just like, holy shit, that was intense. What'd you make of that?
I thought it was funny, just the whole moment where she's just like, just don't worry, he's got an asshole voice.
Joe,
it was just so,
come on. Yeah.
yeah, and then they say something else, and he talks like that again, and she's just like, come on, Joel. I don't know. It's I think that Bella Ramsey as Ellie is really coming into the character, and I it's hard to really tell how much of it is her coming into the character after a couple of episodes, or it's us getting used to her as the character.
Yeah.
But I'm really, really enjoying the two of them cast as Joel and Ellie.
Yeah,
I
it
think
works.
that it's a really great pairing, and I'm loving that as their relationship is developing, we're getting more and more of these little moments between the two of them that were just so fun and heartwarming from the games.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome. And yeah, and we know in the game they kind of run into one another differently, and there's it's similar, but it's also I was waiting for Henry to talk about wanting to ride a Harley Davidson. I was waiting for that, but they probably were like, yeah, we didn't get sponsored by Harley, so we're not going to fucking talk about that in the show. You know what I mean? But he talks about, like, what, you know, how he imagines what it would be like to ride a motorcycle with the wind in your hair and just, you know, and Joel's like, yeah, I've done that. And, like, Henry's like, what? You actually, oh, shit, tell me about it. He's like, tell me, in the game, he's like, tell me about it. What was it like? What did it sound? He's like, brr. He's acting all big and bad like he was on it before, you know, and, like, he knows exactly what it's like, but he admits he was never on one. So they're obviously younger than Joel, right? I don't know what Henry's age is, but that was a nice bonding moment with him and Joel. But I think what we end up getting is a bonding moment when they get into the tunnels. Henry launches this idea about how there's like these tunnels that can get them out of Kansas City, right? And there's some sort of maintenance tunnels, and in the game it's different. They end up in these water tunnels, but it's outside of Pittsburgh, and they just happen to go in, and they find this children's nursery, safe haven for a bunch of survivors. And one of the main survivors was named Ish, had like these little stories and written by Ish, and you could pick them up in the game, right? So we still end up there in the show, but we end up there kind of differently, which they've been doing really, really well with this TV show. They get us to these moments that stand out in our minds, but we don't. The journey there is always a little different. Which is appreciated. It's fresh for me, and I'm sure fresh for you, Jake, and the people who played the game, and they do a great job at it. But yeah, so they decide they're going to leave, they're going to escape. They escape. They get into these maintenance tunnels. We run into like all these chalk colored walls, and it's really cool. And you see a picture that was drawn, and it actually has the name Ish next to one of the characters on the drawing. I don't know if you saw that or not, but that's definitely a shout out for the game. But there's a basketball there, and this is where Ellie and Sam kind of start bonding, and it gives Joel and Henry a little bit of time to talk a little bit more. And anything about that, Jake? Because I thought that was really nice the way they kind of segued into that. I didn't expect to see that at all, the Ish thing, that whole area. But that's cool they put it in there.
I mean, I was assuming that they were going to touch on Ish at some point because he was such a popular, not even character from the game. He was more of like a
story,
a legend, because he was just in like writings that you picked up. But I thought that it was kind of interesting that Henry makes this comment about how nobody went into the tunnels because that's where Fedra drove all of the infected. And then Henry makes a comment, well, like, he found out from a Fedra agent before the uprising that they're actually clear. There's nobody down there, but nobody knows that.
Yeah.
So I thought that it was interesting that they actually made that true to a certain extent. They got all the way through the tunnels. They found the little settlement that was underground that you find in the game, and they got all the way through that, and they got all the way out the other side to the suburbs, and they didn't encounter any infected, which is not how it turns out in the game. In the game,
You find all kinds of bad shit.
You get run over by infected or ambushed.
And what they do in the game, which is really cool. Sorry, not to interject. What they do in the game is Joel and Sam get separated from Henry and Ellie. And it's then Joel's like, oh shit, now I have to trust Henry with Ellie because I can't get back to them. They get separated in the game, and they literally just physically can't get back in touch with one another. So there's a period of the game as the game where you're like, oh fuck, I'm leaving Ellie alone with this dude we just met. And but you're also responsible for his little brother. And so that creates this really awesome dynamic in the game. They didn't really follow that up. But what do you think? Do you think they should have maybe alluded to the folks who were living in there and like shown corpses or bodies or skeletons or like the dark side of that? Because they didn't even touch on it. I don't remember them touching on that at all.
I think that the implication is that they all became infected. And that's why they're not there anymore. Or that they evacuated. But this kind of leads into sort of my only beef with this episode, which I imagine that we're going to get into it. But your point about the part where Joel and where the two groups get split up, that was an awesome part of the game.
It was amazing.
Like, I wish that they had left that in there, because there's this moment where Henry's like distraught because Joel has Sam, and he's like, you better protect him.
Right.
And then they like run away. They run away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
it's a bonding
I kind of
moment.
wish that they had that. Yeah, I wish they'd had that kind of little moment in the TV show. But it's not all in all, really, I don't think really detracted from the show at all. Really, my big, I say big, but my small gripe with the episode really boils down to what happens in town after they get through the tunnels.
Sure. Well, real quick about the tunnel thing. The ish thing. That moment, why I think it's so poignant is that is the catalyst for creating absolute trust between all four of those characters. Joel has to trust Henry. Henry has to trust Joel. Ellie has to trust Henry. Sam has to trust Joel. Sam has to trust Henry for allowing that to happen. And Ellie has to trust Joel for allowing that split to happen. And they just all have to trust one another implicitly. Like, this is who we have. We have to believe in one another to get through this. And that brought all those that separation brought all those characters way tighter in that amount of time, because their lives were at risk in those tunnels. They were getting attacked. They were separated. It was scary. They could hear each other, but they didn't know what was going on. I don't know why they left that out, because that really, really created a tense moment. And it also made you it was a test of all of their mettle, right? And it was like, holy shit, like that's really important for the impact at the end of this episode to even have more of an impact, I think. Is it like, not only are Henry and Sam proven to be good people and proven to be very similar to Joel and Ellie, but they were capable people that could have helped. You know what I mean? And they meant well. And I think that losing them in that regard kind of sucks, because, they're alone. They're alone. Joel and Ellie are alone. It's nice to have a group, although maybe a little dangerous at times. I don't know.
I will admit that you have a note on here about it, and I think that probably my favorite part of that whole underground sequence is them kind of looking at the comic book. I thought that was kind of neat about, because this is the first time that we kind of hear about Savage Starlight. In the game, there's this whole thing in Bill's town with the game cabinet and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But turns out that her and Sam both, collected these comics, even though they each only had a couple of them. I think they each only had 3 of them or 2 of them or something like that. And
Parallel, yeah.
they have this, and you see them like reading the comic book together, and it's just a very touching moment, and it shows like them bonding, and Joel makes some comment to Henry earlier in the episode about how, or I think it's maybe Henry makes a comment to Joel about how Sam, never laughs really. And that was something that he hadn't heard in a long time because Ellie was showing him her joke book.
Right.
And I just think that whole scene was just another kind of nail that eventually gets driven into the fucking depression coffin that happens at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
But,
it was pretty rough.
yeah, so but other than that, the Ish thing was cool. I thought it was cool that they kind of drew him as the child picture made it look like he was a Fedra agent. So you kind of almost assume that maybe in the TV show he was murdered in the fucking uprising or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess you don't really know. But you don't know what happens to him in the game either, I don't think, really. There's like an implication that there was an attack or whatever.
I think you find corpses in there. Covered in sheets
but I
or
can't
something.
remember if you actually. But I can't remember if you actually find a dead Ish or not.
No, I don't
or
think you
if
find
it's just-
Ish. Yeah, you have no way to know. And I think
or if
everyone
it's like his family or something.
everyone had assumed that Ish was like short for Ishmael, like the Moby Dick stuff. And I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So, anyways, they get out. They get out of the tunnels, and they start going into like that residential area that is in the game also. And I was like, oh, that's with like the scene where Ellie and Sam play darts. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of in that area where she sees the ice cream truck and she cracks the joke in the game. She's like, "Hey, Joel, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a truck. I used to play music and give ice cream to kids and drive around town and." And she's like, "Quit fucking with me." And he's like, "No, really." And she goes, "Shut up, Joel." And he's like, "No, it really wasn't nice. That's what we did." And she's like, "What?" Like it's like blew her mind, So I'm kind of bummed the ice cream truck dialogue wasn't in there. Maybe we'll get it down the road. I don't know. But the idea of an ice cream truck was like the coolest thing to Ellie. She actually thought Joel was messing with her. But they're in that residential area with Sam and Henry, and they're walking around for a bit, and it starts getting dark. And I go to Chelsea. I'm like, here comes, they're going to get shot at any minute. And then, kabam, it happens, right? And the sniper scene from the game, almost one-to-one the way it starts off. The way it ends is way different.
Yeah.
But you said you kind of had a bone to pick about this. And I guess I would have been completely content if the my biggest thing, it seems like a weak story point that this sniper was somehow stationed on the outskirts of town and was in communication with Kathleen, and she just happens to have everybody at the ready to come storming into this residential area to take out Henry and Sam. They're just ready, And it's like, no, they would have been all scattered. They would have been all over the fucking place. It was late at night. That shit wouldn't have happened like that. And the sniper turns out to be, like I said, he was working with with Kathleen's faction, and he was just there by himself with a fucking gun, just hanging out. No one else around, just him. Like, what? That's weird. It was really weird.
Well, that town was like right on the edge of the area before the bridge to get across the river. So it kind of makes sense that she would have somebody guarding that area. And it was just like a single old dude that was just like sitting out there watching the for people to come up. Um, I I don't really have so much of an issue with that. Honestly, I thought that it was awesome how Joel was like, "Just stay here. He's a crap shot.
Oh, that
I'm
part
just
was
gonna
awesome.
sneak around
Yeah, that part was
and
cool.
go get him." And he goes up there, and you see this like humanization of Joel,
It
where
looks
he's
just like
just
the
like
game too, going up those
he's
steps.
like, "Please don't do it. Please don't do it. Just put the gun down, and I'll let you
Yeah, don't
go."
make me do
And the
this.
guy turns the gun on him, and Joel shoots him. And it's so you could tell based on these moments that Joel really doesn't want to be this guy, even though he's sort of forced to be him. And I think that that's really neat because he in the show so far, and even in the game, like he seems like this heartless bastard after the events of his daughter dying and going up into this sort of part of the story with Ellie. And I thought that that was kind of a neat moment. My gripe is with what happens after that.
Yeah, I just think that Kathleen's group and in the game you do get ransacked by this fucking mini tank AT vehicle. I don't know, like some sort of transport vehicle that has a machine gun on top, and as Joel, you are stuck up in that tower with the sniper weapon, and the zombies or the clickers and the infected come out, and the crew, Sam, Henry, and Ellie are just trying to survive. And you do have to save them. Is there not a tank in that situation? I think there is, because you shoot the guy, right? The gunner.
I'm trying to remember how that sequence plays out. I think what bugged me was that now I'm gonna be freaking be proving me
I'm
wrong.
pretty sure that happens.
Sniper scene, Last of Us game.
Dude, I just typed that
I'm
exact same thing. Sniper
I'm
mission
looking
Last
this
of Us.
here. I want to see. I want to see. We're gonna do this in real time because I want to see if I'm indignant for no reason because I've found that that is entirely possible.
I just think it's ridiculous that many fucking bad guys showed up. There were all in the game. There were already bad guys all over that house. The house was surrounded by bad guys, in the game, and you had to work your way to get into that house and take that sniper out, right? And
Okay. Yeah, I'm watching it now, and it is. Now maybe this is what Neil had in mind, but he couldn't do it from limitation of
Sorry to interrupt.
PS3 or whatever.
Are you okay? I need to.
This sequence is very much visually like the game, but in the game it's just like the truck is there, and then after the truck leaves, the
clickers come out.
some clickers start coming in, and you have to kind of hold them off while the three Sam and Henry and Ellie get to the house. I think what bugs me about the show is that literally a fucking army shows up with Kathleen. There's like 50 guys there. And they're all kitted out with all this guns and, all this body armor and shit. And then, they're having their little argument, their little standoff or whatever. And then a hole breaks open in the ground and a bloater comes out. And literally like this World War Z shit happens where like fucking 100 clickers come running out of the ground like crazy and just start mauling all of the guys in Kathleen's group.
Yeah.
And then to make a long story short, Kathleen just like dies.
Yeah,
basically.
she gets attacked by some child infected person. Yeah.
But what bugs me about it is that I understood why they made Kathleen's character because they wanted to humanize the hunters in that group. But what bugs me about it is that like you like made this like unstoppable group of guys, and then you're just like, we need a way to get rid of all these people so they can get away. Let's just have a shitload of zombies come out of the ground, kill them all, and then just let our group narrowly escape. You know, it seems kind of cheap to me. Like they were just using that as an excuse to do this TV set piece for like all these zombies to come out. You know what I mean? It's almost like they wrote all of those military people into that scene so that they would have an excuse to flood this scene with zombies, because we haven't seen them in 2 episodes.
Right. Well, here's the
because we really haven't seen them in 2 episodes.
I agree.
And I will admit though, I love 2 scenes in that whole sequence. The one scene I love, which I just think as just a, you know, a butch dude, I think is awesome, when that fucking bloater just grabs Perry and just rips his head off.
Yeah,
like
that's very much a clicker kill. Like when they grab your mouth and your jaw and they separate it, and and it's like, you know, and that's how you die.
Yeah,
in the game, those
and I love that other scene. And I love that other scene where Ellie crawls into the car.
Oh yeah, dude.
And it's like quiet, around, and that little child clicker like fucking acrobatically like rolls into the vehicle and then like sits up behind her.
Dude,
it's so cool.
It was so Exorcist like. Yeah, it was messed up. Yeah,
it was so cool.
I don't know. At no point in the Last of Us game are there that many infected, and they are certainly not that fast. So we went from infected to World War Z, or infected to the game Days Gone, like a zombie horde, instantly.
Yeah.
So we kind of jumped into a territory. You know, the threat of the infected in the game isn't so much that they're really, really fucking fast and they travel in large groups. It's more so that you know, any scratch, any kind of bite, and it's over. Or they're just really creepy. And there was way more infected in this scene than I could have even imagined, and it was like, holy shit. Like, so they upped the ante a little bit with the number of infected, but it didn't feel natural. You know, the way that the ground caves in, and they kind of touched on that a little bit in the last episode. Perry and Kathleen were looking, and the ground's kind of bubbling underneath, you know, and you're like, oh, she's like, let's not tell anybody. You know, we got to find Henry and Sam first. So her, by not alerting people that there could be some tendrils under the ground, or that like shit was about to bubble up like a volcano of infected, eventually bit her in the ass, because that exactly happened at that moment. And it was weird. The bloater was cool. I also had a little bit of issue with the bloater. I know that it was supposed to have been entirely prosthetics and stuff, but there were clearly moments where that bloater was CG, and it looked bad in one motion, where it's picking somebody up and like dropping them, like the speed of it or something was just off. And I was like, oh, dude, that's so CG right now. I could be wrong. I could be, or maybe maybe they sped the frame up or something to make it look a certain way, but it looked so weird to me. It didn't look natural. I don't know.
Yes, some of that, if you watch the after whatever, I think that was a hybrid of like CG and practical effects.
Okay.
And so I'm sure some of it was.
And I'm just being hypercritical, dude. I thought it was still cool.
Yeah, I didn't really have too much of an issue with any of that. But
when they're spending, I don't what they say, like how many millions of dollars per episode?
Or sorry, I think it's $10 million an episode is what they're spending.
You would think that the CG for the bloater would be freaking perfect. And the first time I saw, because that's what you're looking at when you're watching the episodes, the big fucking thing. And it's kind of in the distance, and it's just like moving its arm, and like I was like, oh, dude, that looks so fake. And that one cut, it looked so. The rest of the bloater was great, but that one cut, it was just looked so animated. I don't know, it was really weird. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I couldn't fucking do that. So
yeah, I mean, the only thing really left to talk about though is the fateful scene.
Yeah, well, let's get to it. Let's get to it and wrap things up. Yeah.
Now, so basically there's this moment between where everybody's in the room or in the motel. I think they stayed in the house maybe in the game, but like in this they traveled along a little bit till they got to a motel or something.
Correct.
So basically, you know, Henry tells Sam and Ellie go the fuck to sleep, and they're like, okay, but they decide to stay up and they're reading the comic and they're laughing, right? And they're having a good time. And essentially, I don't remember in the game. I don't think Sam reveals that he's bit in the game.
No, he doesn't show it.
I think
no.
In the show, he reveals to Ellie that he's been bit. And Ellie decides to not say anything, but to try to heal him
with her blood.
With her magic blood, essentially, is what she says.
Which is exactly what a 14-year-old fucking kid would try to do. 100%. If they thought they were the cure, that's what you would do.
So this is the difference between the game, the major difference in this scene between the game and the TV show. Everything else is basically spot on. You know, I think in the TV show they were playing with, like, Sam had a robot that he was playing with or something, and they weren't talking about a comic or whatever. But mainly there's this sequence where it was revealed to Ellie and she tried to heal him with her blood. And if you played the game, you watched the show, you know that didn't work. You know, they wake up in the morning and there's this fucking creepy moment, just like in the game though. Like, this part is just like the game.
It was spot on, dude.
Where Sam is like faced away from her, looking towards the window. He's like sitting on the bed. I think in the game he's actually standing at the window or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Like he's like, it's like the same kind of shot. And Ellie goes up to talk to him, and he like freaks out because he's infected and he's turned and he starts attacking her.
In the game, I was gonna say in the game, her, Joel, and Henry are hanging out in like the kitchen of this house, and they're like, "Where's Sam at?" And Ellie's like, "Oh, he's still sleeping." And then like, go get him real quick, or something like that, right? Don't they say, "Hey, go wake Henry up," or "Go wake Sam up"? Sorry. And then Ellie goes in the room and then sees that and comes fucking flying out because he's turned. And that's why he didn't get up in the morning, because he was fucked up. I think that was how that played out in the game.
You might be right, but I do think that everything else about this whole sequence was spot on from the game. From the part where Ellie comes flying out into the room and Sam is on top of her, to the point where Henry shoots the ground at Joel's feet to keep him away from Sam.
Right.
To the point where, you know, unfortunately, you know, Henry has to shoot Sam to
save
kill
Ellie.
him, essentially, because he's infected, to save Ellie. Yeah. And then the part where he just like gives up and takes his own life. And this is one of those scenes. So this was one of the scenes going into the show where I really want to know what it's like for somebody who's never played the game to experience this.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we know it's coming, right? We know what's going to happen. It's just a matter of how are they going to make it in the TV show.
1-to-1, man.
And they did it exactly like you're saying. It was exactly like it was in the game. And I think that really says something to the power of the way that Neil originally wrote this game. And how that scene was so good.
Yeah. And to the power of fucking video games. Like everyone's just like, oh, I get it now. And it's like, do you? Because we've been fucking playing this since 2013. We've been on this shit for years. This is why we play games. This is why video games has like one of the biggest fucking markets, because they can tell these kinds of stories. Now, granted, not all games are even close to this. But it's interesting to me that people are like, this is based on a game. Like, what? It's like, yeah, like, just fucking open your eyes a little bit. Yeah, this shit is going on in video games, and you're telling these compelling stories. So many games have compelling stories and narratives. It's not just The Last of Us. There's more. There's more. But, yeah.
I would argue that there are probably still not any games that tell a narrative as good as the original Last of Us or The Last of Us Part 2.
I would agree, but think about
there are a lot of games that come close.
Yeah.
If you think about even the Uncharted
games,
or you think about the Life is Strange games, you think about
Uncharted. They kind of butchered the movie, but we're a bit of a digression.
Well, but you're talking about games and their ability to tell a story, right? We're not talking about
character development,
the
stories,
film adaptation, right?
Gone Home.
But this scene was just very, very cool. In that it was spot on. The actor that played Henry, I don't know his name, but the actor that played Henry did such a good job.
Unbelievable.
I mean, the actor that played Sam as a deaf kid did such an amazing job too. Like the actors that they've gotten in the show,
the whole
have
show,
been so fucking good.
Dude, that kid was such a cute kid.
He really was.
He was really cool.
And it was really tough to see what happened to him, but Sarah's sister is watching the show.
Yeah.
And she's never played the game.
Oh yeah.
Her boyfriend has played it.
Yeah.
Who's watching it with her, but she's never experienced the game. So she's kind of been reporting in a little bit to Sarah as she's been watching it, and I think her response was something like "Holy fuck" to like the last that episode after it was over.
Yeah.
And it's I can understand that. Even though I've played the game multiple times, I still am kind of affected by these scenes when they happen, even though I know they're coming.
Dude, 3 of 5 of these TV episodes have ended with Chelsea crying. Like, it's just like, wow. Yeah, they're doing a good job. The first one's really sad when Joel's kid dies in his arms. The second one, that isn't how they end it, but I mean, like, it's just the whole thing's so impactful. Yeah. The second one was the Bill's town, with that ending. She was bawling, and then this one, she was just in tears. And it's just like, this world is unforgiving. This world's terrible. The show makes you feel something, and the game makes you feel things. And that's so important. That's so important in media these days. We get so distracted by the lights and glitter and the glamour and the fucking, the expose of entertainment that sometimes I think as humans and as just people in general, we need to be reminded of how precious humanity is and how precious life is. We're so desensitized by things all the time, whether it be watching the news or whatever, but you get involved and you get to know these characters, and then just like that, these two brothers are just gone. Sam and Henry just gone. And it's so fucking
especially
sad.
Because there's that whole sequence before this happens where Joel is like, they're gonna party up. They're gonna go on this adventure.
He's like,
together.
yeah, all right, fine, let's do it.
And then
you're welcome to the group.
And then the next, like literally moments later, both of them are dead, and Joel and Ellie are alone again. And then there's that whole scene where
burying
Henry at the very end, which was not in the game. I don't think it was in the game, at least, where Ellie puts Sam's little notepad on his grave
and writes like, I'm sorry.
It just says, I'm sorry on it. And then they both kind of, she kind of walks off without Joel, and then is just like, are you coming?
Yeah, right.
Because she's really kind of cold.
She's
after
trying to
this,
move past it. She's just shutting it out. Like she's trying to rule it out. Like, just forget it instantly, It's a fucking brutal world, man. What a great episode.
It is a really, really good episode. I really enjoyed it. I'm curious about what's next, because what's next should be everything to do with they're going to get to Colorado, so it'll be everything surrounding Joel's. Yeah, actually.
Oh, we're gonna go to the water.
The dumb chance that you haven't fucking played the game, but you're watching the TV show and watching this podcast. I won't spoil what happens next, but basically the next the sequence, and they show it in the previews. We're gonna get to see Tommy, Joel's brother again, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm curious how far they'll make it, because they've got 4 episodes left. And they've got they've got at least 2 major points they still got to hit.
Dude, are you really? So, I mean, I don't want to spoil. We'll end the show, and then I'll ask you real quick. I don't want to bring it up on the show right now because I am curious if this certain thing is going to happen. All right. Well, hey,
I'm mostly wondering how they're going to handle the David situation.
Oh, I wasn't even curious about that. I had another thing I was going to.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of fucking ground to cover, man. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was our critique, review, reaction, discussion about The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 5, Endure and Survive. It was a great episode. And that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Monday to talk more about The Last of Us. And like I said, if you want to tune in every Monday, we have a PlayStation podcast. So you can get on your favorite streaming platforms. This series is YouTube exclusive. It's the only way we're putting it out there. So subscribe to this channel. Give us a like. Leave a comment. Tell us what you liked about Season 1, Episode 5 of The Last of Us. We'll catch you next time. Like The Last of Us. P.S.
Yes.
This is awesome.
This is awesome.